Hi, my name is Dana Arnett, co-host of Wicked Marketing, along with my partner, Carlos Sapene. You can find more information about us and our business on LinkedIn, or if you have any questions, email us at info@wickedbionic.com. Subscribe to Wicked Marketing on Apple Podcasts and write an awesome review for us. We're also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. Thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Carlos.
And I'm Dana.
Thank you for joining us today. We have
an amazing,
incredible.
I feel so fortunate, don't you, Carlos?
Yes, expert and friend too for many years.
Yes, her name is Lia Haberman. She is an amazing content expert. I get so excited to read the things that she posts on LinkedIn. So smart. And on the professional side, Lia is an adjunct professor at UCLA. She's a corporate trainer. She's a communications expert. And I'm so fortunate we've worked with her on a couple of projects. And Carlos has a long history with Lia.
Yes. So welcome, Lia.
Thank you. You've really set up some expectations there. I can deliver.
You better deliver.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things that I really love about Lia, and some of the things that I think are going to be super beneficial for our listeners today, is the fact that while I feel like I'm very well-rounded from the technology standpoint and leveraging technology to benefit your business from a social media standpoint and a marketing standpoint and all of that, Lia has always been to me that complement from the content standpoint. Lia and I worked together at E! Entertainment Television and the Style Network back in the day. And she came from the editorial background and then grew into this huge digital executive that she is now. And she's one of the few people that I know in the industry that truly understands digital as its own environment and world. So I'm very excited to have you, Lia.
Yes.
I am happy to be here.
Thank you.
So
Lia.
I wanted to start talking a little bit about your expertise with content in particular, because it is one of those things that I hear a lot in the industry, that people spend so much time, effort, and money in building out content, in putting out content on social media, and they don't always see the benefit from it. In my case, I feel like it's a lack of strategy. Why don't you tell us sort of how you teach people to look at content and what processes you think of when people are considering how they modify or create a content strategy for the future?
So I think the interesting thing with content, and as you mentioned, I came from the media side. And so when you come, I would have called myself, in those days, I would have said I was a journalist. Now I think of myself more just as a digital, marketing person, woman. Yeah. But I think in those days I came from media. And so coming up through like a very traditional media / journalism or editorial background, you're really creating content for the audience. And that is first and foremost. And so I think every time that I approach something, the audience needs are what I think of first. Obviously, it depends on what, industry or what brand or, corporation that you work for, but you're really thinking of, okay, we worked at an entertainment company. People want entertainment. We knew our audience. We had a really good sense. I think both you and I kind of concurred on that. We had a really good idea. We both moderated back in those days, the community boards. And so we read the comments, we moderated the community. And in some ways, like not that glamorous, but it was really good training for understanding what the audience was looking for from us, tapping into that and creating content for them, content that now I say when I teach my students at UCLA, I teach influencer marketing and social media marketing. And part of that is you have to make sure that you provide value for the audience. You want to educate, inform, or inspire them. The content should have, hopefully it has maybe two of those. And I think if we do talk about TikTok later, TikTok is really pushing education and in an entertaining format. So I've talked to some different TikTokers and they're just talking about like, the platform's been talking to them and really like the focus and where they're going. And so for them, it's education and entertainment. Inspiration, I think, is also important. And so you've got to make sure that your content is hitting one of those buckets and providing that value for the audience. And I think that that's a little bit different when I moved more into a marketing role. you're essentially trying to sell your company, your product, or your service. And so your content is very much geared towards what you have, as opposed to, you've got to think about what it is, what's your marketing message, what's your marketing strategy, as opposed to just looking purely at what the audience need is and thinking about, okay, what kind of content can I produce for this audience? So I think that you can do it. I just think that it takes a little bit more digging and a little bit more work, and, creating a piece of content around whatever your product or service is and being like, I love my company, I love what we sell, you guys better enjoy this. That's not a really great content strategy. Yeah. That's you bragging or promoting yourself, which is fine. And there's always room for that. But I think you really have to look at the audience and think like, okay, what problem are we solving for them? How does our product solve that for them? And what kind of content can we create around this that's really going to fill a hole or a need and provide a value for that audience?
So I really, really love that. I'm going to repeat that. Educate, inform, and inspire. Key tenets of content development. Love that, Lia, because, we're the biggest proponents, in particular from the marketing space, that your marketing strategy needs to be 80% about the customer and 20% about marketing your product.
Yes.
So I love the idea of looking at that 80% from those educate, inform, and inspire sort of tent poles, right?
Yep.
And then looking at the 20%, usually the way that we recommend is looking at it from your passion. What was the passion that put you into the business versus selling the product? Mm-hmm. Using that passion to help you promote that product. So that kind of leads me into talking a little bit more about leveraging that passion, right? I think it's one of the things that you mentioned, which you're an expert at, and we wrote a book on, which is influencers and influencer marketing. One of the trends that I've seen because the influencer world, as with everything, right, and media and digital, started with this boom of people just going out there and trying to work with anybody just because they had a number behind them, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those numbers were inflated, they weren't real, they weren't measurable, targeted, anything like that. As the industry has continued to evolve within the space, one of the things that has come out of it is micro influencers and working with people, because the purpose of influence is really to use the voice, or one of the purposes and main purposes of influence is to use the voice of someone that already connects with their audience, to use that passion for your brand to translate to their audience the message, right? So right. What are your views on what's happening in the influencer space, the micro influencers, the value of doing influencer marketing, and also the different sort of cost structures that you're seeing out there in the industry?
And also, before you jump in, would you also give a definition of what micro influencers are for our listeners?
Micro influencer is about, and this kind of depends on the industry and depends on the company, but like 10,000 followers or less. Nano is really small. Nano is like 2,000 or less. Micro tends to be about 10,000. I think. I don't know if you guys feel similarly, but
that's the numbers that I use.
About the spot.
Yeah, the micro ones, anything over 1,000 and up to 3,000-4,000 is nano, and then 10,000, yeah.
So influencers are based upon or judged upon how many followers they have.
Yeah, we label them. I mean, correctly or incorrectly, we do label them based on their follower count. So it's like a nano influencer, micro, macro, mega, and then celebrity, and celebrities like 5 million and beyond, and the Kardashians of the world. I think micro influencers, the thing that you're getting with micro influencers is they tend to have a very specific niche, something, an expertise that's really specific and kind of drilled down, honed down to an audience that is very engaged with them. And so yes, not everybody has the budget to hire a mega or a celebrity influencer. It's great if you do, if you want to have just kind of really widespread awareness. Typically, the larger mega and celebrity influencers don't tend to have that niche. They're very broad. And so you get like a very wide swath of an audience. And as we know, when you're, especially, there are different stages, but especially when you're in like the growth stages of marketing, you want that really, that audience that's like that valuable audience, that audience that is like my qualified audience. So you are really looking for a qualified audience. And I think what the micro influencer brings to you is a qualified audience. They're typically following them for a very, specific purpose. And so they're really buying into what that person is saying, whatever message that person is promoting, they're really buying into that. So I think it's also a lot more affordable. Yeah. I also think that, so one of the interesting things, I just saw something, it was actually an article this morning where they talked about somebody who was an intern at Google, who is also a TikTok influencer. And this is something that I have to say I'm seeing a lot of, both in the corporate world and also in my classes at UCLA. Students come in, we're talking like junior talent, who already have maybe 40,000 Instagram followers, or 20,000 TikTok followers, and they're being hired for jobs. They're coming into the workplace now, where people are coming in with their own built-in audience and their own built-in online brand, and they are micro influencers that are coming into companies. And I don't think, not only do you want to take advantage and get involved with influencer marketing in terms of going out and finding influencers that have an affinity for your brand, but I think also looking internally at the talent that you're onboarding. Typically, most companies do not seem to really recognize or appreciate who they already have in-house. And I think particularly if you're a company that's, hiring somebody that's, young millennial or Gen Z just getting out of school, is really looking at them and just seeing what they have, what power and community they bring with them. And so I really recommend, it's, to me, that's like wishful thinking. Like, I want to hire somebody that has whatever skill set I'm looking for, but also happens to be an influencer. I think their audience is really invested in them. They're still typically micro influencers. And I think trying to figure out how to take advantage of that and harness that power, as opposed to saying, don't mention the company. We need to look at your socials. You can't, you can't do X, Y, and Z. The thing is, particularly if it's in-house talent, you want to figure out how you can tap into that and collaborate and kind of leverage that for your own advantage. If you're working with out-of-house influencers or an influencer you hired, it's the same thing. The influencer understands their audience. And at the end of the day, you are paying for access to their audience. They understand their audience best. They have built this community. And I think certainly there's, a brand message that you want to get across and the right handles and hashtags. But the influencer understands best how to market to their audience. And I think that the best thing you can do as a brand is hire this influencer, tell them what you want, and then let them create the message and roll that message out in the way that they best know to market to their audience.
True. And it is one of the biggest things that Dana and I talk about a lot on this podcast, which is the value of authenticity, right? And the reason why people choose to follow someone is because they feel like they have an authentic connection, which is funny because if you remember, Lia, when we were at E, one of the studies that the marketing team did was on the success of the Kardashians. And one of the biggest takeouts of that study that I remember was that people felt like the Kardashians were their friends. Right. They would defend Kim like they knew her. They would come in and say, no, I know Kim. She would never do that. Right. So that I know them. And that authenticity is one of the biggest drivers. I still feel behind that brand that took them to the place that they're still at. Yeah. And it is.
We actually talk about that in class, where it's a parasocial relationship where you get the sense that even though this person's on TV or, on Instagram and you've never met them, they cultivate this kind of relationship with you where you feel like you are friends in real life. And like you said, you refer to them in the first name, you know, Kim, Chloe, Courtney. These are people within your circle. And that's why they have so much power and so much influence, because you perceive them as, you know, friends or acquaintances.
Yeah. And I think that that's where a lot of the brands, and I couldn't agree with you more, are failing to not only capitalize on their marketing budgets that they're spending on influencers, but that they're failing to capitalize on their internal brand advocates, which, you know, if you think back in the day, one of the main resources for an HR department was the people that worked within the company, right? Because those people had a love and passion for that company, and they would want to bring in people that they knew that were super talented, that would reflect well upon them. It's that same sort of environment from the perspective of, if you love the company and you love what you're doing, you're going to be the best brand advocate for that company in your own words, right? So to your own social audience. So I love that idea of looking at who are the people of influence that you already have, that you, instead of warning, can nurture and can help them build a platform that can help you as an organization put out your messaging out there in an honest and authentic way. I really love that approach.
That was really, so much. And I think the one thing I was thinking as I was listening, thinking of the people that listen to our podcast is, you know, if I'm a brand at whatever level that I might be a brand, whether I can afford, you know, a nano influencer or a micro influencer or somebody larger, you know, how would I go about, Lia, finding these influencers? Not necessarily find them, but is there a central place that I would go to find out who's in what particular niches? Or is there is there like an agency? What's my best way? Or is it just simply in research to find out who's out there in the space that I might want to get some
So there's a couple of different ways to do it. You can certainly I'm very much a fan of doing the research yourself, understanding, you know, who do you follow? Certainly if it's your company, you should have an idea of like who the players are in your space. If you don't, and you have a specific social person, you know, hopefully that they would have an idea of like, who are the big players or influencers in your space? And if you don't know, I think it's a good idea to get online, start searching hashtags, do a Google search. I mean, one time I was going to Chicago for an event and we needed a specific type of influencer in Chicago. And I didn't have that person in my network. So I literally just Googled, you know, top 10 influencers, fitness influencers in Chicago. And that gave me, it's a little bit like a Yelp review. You're not necessarily going to go with one of those 10 people, but it gives you a place to start digging. Right. I think, you know, certainly there are also there are either agencies like digital agencies, or there are these kind of online clearinghouses that are, you know, they have 5,000-10,000 influencer names, and they're essentially to like pair up influencers and brands with collaborations. I think if you're trying to scale something, or you have really no clue about influencer marketing and you want to outsource most of it, I think some of these like clearinghouse database type of things are useful. They do own the relationship. However, they're sort of a middleman between you and the influencer. So I think you just want to be cautious about making sure it doesn't, you know, the perception then is if you do like a one-off thing with an influencer, it doesn't seem, to your point, Carlos, to use the word authentic, it doesn't really seem like an authentic or organic sponsorship or brand ambassadorship. So you really want to be looking for somebody that you can like develop maybe more of a deeper ongoing relationship. I think also the one thing that I'll just, I want to make sure that we have time to say this, is that like influencers, for anybody that's sitting there and still skeptical, influencers have gone so far past just somebody that takes a selfie. And there's nothing wrong with selfies. Your campaign might involve an influencer taking selfies. But I think like the concept of influencer has evolved, where you want to think it's somebody that has something to say, not just takes a pretty photo. So I think when you're looking at influencers and evaluating, are they right for my business? Along with looking at like, okay, what space are they in? Travel industry, food, fashion. You also want to like read their captions, read the replies that they, you know, reply to their followers. Read anything else that they've done online, and just make sure that they stand for something and actually have something to say. And I think, Carlos, to go back to your micro influencer question, I think that particularly the ones that have a really well-developed niche and community are the ones that have the most to say and an expertise that they're kind of pairing with their social influence. And that to me is like, that's the sweet spot where you've got an expert with something to say and they've got a social audience and influence. And that's really the person that you're looking for that's going to have the most impact for your business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great, Lia.
So,
Oh, go ahead, Carlos.
yeah. So just adding on to what Lia was saying, or just reiterating basically what Lia was saying, look at who already exists in your environment, in whatever your industry is, that has already developed a connection. I always tell this story, and you'll remember this, Lia, where it's not about the size, it is about that authenticity and engagement. We did a campaign with Rihanna when we were launching a show with her on the Style Network. And Rihanna had at the time, I think, 60 million followers on her account. And at the same time, we were doing a campaign with Tia and Tamara Mowry. Their show was returning to the Style Network, and they had like 400,000 followers on their account. The post from Rihanna talking about the TV show brought in, I think it was like 20,000 people onto the website. And it actually took the website down for a few minutes. We brought it back up. But it lasted about 5 minutes and then it was done, right? Whereas when Tia and Tamara put a tweet out, it was this deluge of people and comments and engagement that lasted like 3 days of conversation around the show coming back or the themes of the show. So it's not the 60 million, it's the engagement, the love that these people that are their followers have for that influencer that really brings the value to you by drawing up a conversation. If the influencer cannot draw up a conversation that you can then, like Lia said, hop in, participate, be effective at communicating and connecting with these leads basically that are coming in to your brand, then you're not really getting the value out of pure brand exposure out there, right?
Well, you're not buying a magazine ad. You're
Exactly.
not buying, I'm gonna buy this one thing, I'm gonna get this exposure and I'm done. It is, I think more than any other type of relationship that we talk about in marketing, the way to have influencer marketing benefit you, what you're both saying is relationship. Just like every other part of what we do in business, relationships. So, and that takes time and that takes choosing the right people for your brand.
All right. Well, thank you, Lia. If you can stick around, we'll I think move on for our next podcast next week, you guys. We're going to be talking with Lia about TikTok.
One of my favorite subjects.
Right
Yes.
That's a great popular subject. We're writing blogs on it and everything. So
we'll leave you on that cliffhanger for next week.
Lia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Thanks, Dana.
You bet.
Thank you for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe to and share Wicked Marketing on Apple Podcasts and write an awesome review for us. We are also on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Google Play. See you next time.